Hey Samir, it's great to see you. I'm Jeremy Watson. I'm a group product manager here at GitLab, and I am responsible for the managed stage of the DevOps lifecycle, which includes a number of different areas and capabilities in GitLab, one of which includes analytics and our analytics suite of features inside the product. That includes value stream management, includes insights. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about kind of the overview there of how analytics works in GitLab, what we have today, and where we're going in the future. And hopefully we can share this conversation with anyone that's interested. Does that sound all right to you?
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, awesome. So you've actually created an agenda here, and you had a few questions that you wanted to touch on. Do you want to start there?
Yes, let me go to the agenda. I apologize. I should have opened that up first.
Oh, it's no worries at all. I did type in some thoughts there, but we can start there. I'll kick it off. The first question that you posed was, what are some good metrics that can be used to measure DevSecOps? And I thought that was a really interesting question. And fundamentally, to me, like DevSecOps is all about kind of combining development, operations, and security efforts in order to ultimately like get your code to market faster. The ultimate outcome of DevOps and DevSecOps is basically you're shortening time to market, you're compressing the amount of time you need to take to get something out to production. You're reducing the amount of cost it is to deploy, so that whenever there is an error or there's a mistake or a defect, the cost of actually like being able to correct it becomes very, very small. But ultimately, like you're increasing the quality of your output because you're shifting all the like testing and security and compliance efforts left, so that you're doing these earlier and making the kind of a natural part of your development cycle. So the ultimate way of measuring like the effectiveness of your DevSecOps effort is shipping things faster, reduce number of errors, and then faster kind of deploys more often, that you're deploying more frequently. So what I've seen in the marketplace is the industry is kind of coalescing and around those types of metrics, and they're like customers are kind of coming to us more often requesting these things, and they're no longer saying what metrics should we be looking at. They actually say like, these are the ones that I've read about that I kind of want to see in the product. And the way that, so those are the questions that people want to have answered. It's like, are we actually seeing like faster time to market? Are we seeing like fewer vulnerabilities like in production? And so there are these key metrics that were first called out in this book called Accelerate that have now become called the DORA metrics. And those are the ones that customers are coming to us asking for. And those are like four key ones that kind of come to mind. The first of which is lead time, which kind of harkens back to that concept of like, are we actually getting things to production faster? Which is like, what is the time it takes on average to go from commit to production? So the developer pushes a commit to a branch and it actually makes it to production. How long does that process actually take? And the goal is for this to be an hourly process that's happening so frequently, and you're pushing new code to production so frequently that it's happening multiple times a day. If you're in a stage of your software development lifecycle where it's taking weeks, months, then the cost of and the amount of lead time it takes is so high that if there is an error or there is a mistake, then it costs you weeks and weeks of time in order to correct it, and therefore it takes your time to get to market just kind of slows down to a radical degree because the cost of the defect becomes so ridiculously high. The second one is really around deploy frequency. It's like, how fast are we actually deploying changes to production? The ideal is like you're doing this multiple times a day. And for organizations that take weeks, if not months, to be able to deploy, we see like radical improvement in velocity for those organizations that can actually deploy very frequently. Time to restore service is also the third one that comes to mind, which is around if we ship a defect that we actually need that leads to some type of unplanned outage or incident, like what is the amount of time it takes us to recover from that? Again, if you're deploying and committing frequently, and you're deploying changes frequently, then ideally it takes you very little time to be able to react to that. Like there's an outage, you can recover from that less than a day because your developer is able to push to production, a rollback or a new merge request really quickly. And then fourth is really around change failure. It's like the number of changes that you actually ship to production that result in like, oh, actually we need to roll this back because it introduced like some critical vulnerability that we didn't really account for, or that, you know, we led to some unexpected outage or some defect that we now need to either remediate or roll back. And by shifting testing and security left, you should see those things happen less and less frequently. And so the goal is like, when looking at a per commit basis, you see this happening kind of like less than 10% of the time. So those are really the four kind of like key metrics that I hear from customers. And we're working on making all these kind of available within GitLab. But if you see yourself kind of embracing DevOps, that philosophy of like pushing as many of these tasks kind of left, like security and testing and compliance, then ultimately you should see kind of like your time to market reduce, your how quickly you're able to recover from failures and how fast you're deploying. And also like the biggest one is like your change failure rate should reduce big time because you're able to catch all these errors before they actually make it to production and reduce the number of times you need to roll things back. So independently of kind of GitLab's capabilities, those are the metrics that I'm hearing from the market and from customers more and more often. Does that make sense to you? Are you hearing something different?
No, that makes sense to me. Understand that we work in the federal government quite a bit. And so there is a little bit of the compliancy question that comes up. So change management framework is generally one of the things that is very heavily oriented towards government business, because there used to be a time when they didn't want just anybody sending through any piece of code. It had to go through a proper change management process, approvals, and so on and so forth. So when we're trying to marry the two concepts, right? One is go as fast as you can with as few stops as possible and measure that. And oh, by the way, make it so that the change management team knows what's going on and everybody else is aware of what's going on. So from that perspective, I see that they need to look at the world a little bit more retrospectively than prospectively, which is what they've been doing. Is there you change one piece of code, okay, why? What was happening? And then did the database team know about it? Did the management know about it? And so on and so forth. It takes like a week for them to just kind of gather the information, and then another week to decide on whether it's the right thing to do or not, and then another week to actually deploy it. And we haven't even got into the actual steps of deployment, like it takes so long. So any thoughts on like how to help measure this with those breaks in the middle? Like even if they're not physical breaks in the sense that the process happened, but how do we stop the clock on some of these metrics and then restart the clock at the right times, kind of question that I have.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two things that come to mind. One is I think that touches on the concept I mentioned earlier of shifting compliance left into the actual process of the actual merge request, of actually the operations. And I think that that's really our philosophy, which is like you say, like these are weeks long processes that takes people to check the checkers who are checking the checkers and make sure that everyone that we have like a evidence artifact trail that matches kind of how we want to handle things internally. This is going to vary from organization to organization. I'm sure even within the public sector, where they have different kind of like levels of compliance depending on like the sensitivity of a particular project, for instance. So we want to move all of that into the product, I think. And I would love to collaborate with you and your team to see what we need to do in order to kind of fulfill the need of public sector. But like, for instance, one thing that we're doing is we're adding this concept of like two-person approval for like sensitive changes. So for some organizations who really want to make sure that they follow concepts like segregation of duties and have like an evidence artifact trail like that, where certain organizations and certain groups like approve of MRs before they actually are merged into production, into master. We're building that kind of dynamic in, so that when it takes like two people of a certain like user type to be able to approve something. And then we roll that up into a compliance dashboard where we can actually like show you different things and different changes that are kind of pending approval. So someone can go down the list and click deny, 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 approve, 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 and actually have audit events that are generated for these events. So this is something that, is developed with, PCI compliance, SOC 2 compliance, the needs of kind of like, a financial organization, not necessarily public sector. So maybe there's more work that we need to do in order to fulfill that. But to answer the first part, which is, I think that we need to move as much of this into the product as we can so that we can, fulfill those needs of those customers in the product as they're generated to prevent them from having to do the week's worth of work later on. The other thing is, I think that from an analytics standpoint, like there's customization that we need to continue to build on. So the primary way and the primary feature that we use is called value stream analytics for this type of customizable analytics needs, which are, we come out of the box and we have certain stages like plan, development, code, test that correspond to generally how people use GitLab to build software. But then we need organizations that have specialized needs. They need to be able to kind of customize this. So I've created like this stage here called like ready for dev idle. You can actually go into value stream and then click on edit, and you can kind of create your own stage in order to kind of like be able to monitor like how long like a particular issue or merge request spent in a particular state. So here you can see that I'm curious to understand like how long an issue sat in ready for development before like a developer actually picked it up. So I say start event is adding ready for development, and then the stop event is adding in dev. So then the developer picks it up, applies the label, and then I can kind of see that on average, it looks like we're just spending 4 days like in ready for development before a developer actually picks it up. And on the right-hand side, you can see like the specific issues and how long that actually took. So, so to answer your question, like there's a certain amount of customizability that we need to build into our tools in order to be able to satisfy some of those specialized needs, which are going to vary from organization to organization. But overall, that's kind of how I see it, which is number one, I'd love to see us move as much of those capabilities into the way that people build software every single day in the product. Number two, you can keep an eye on those metrics by using customizable value stream analytics. And right now, you can build the stage and be able to see like an itemized list on the right-hand side, but in the future, we're planning on doing more like being able to chart and kind of alert on like on changes, so you can kind of keep an eye on how that's changing over time.
Cool. That is actually very, very beneficial vision that you have, because I think that is exactly what the customers are looking to get out of this stuff. And up until now, it's been a bit of a difficult journey because of the separated product suites that they have to use to get some of those metrics, and then to have to run the reports around it. Now,
yeah, and I'm not saying we have everything perfect. I think that's the big advantage of GitLab, which is that we have all that information, all that data, and all those users in a single application. So we can take advantage of that and then do things that other tool chains really can't. So
one of the use cases that this customer is looking at GitLab for is GitOps, where there isn't a whole lot of development going on. They have a bunch of applications that have been developed to a certain extent. It's just maybe bug fixes, maybe one or two things here that are changing on a very large time scale. Like we're talking maybe every 6 months something changes or something like that. The GitOps idea that they have is with regards to making sure that the application's up and running, the cluster's managed, or wherever it's deployed is managed properly, and the application downtime is near zero if at all possible. Is there anything that you're working towards that sort of use case to feed into this, or is our world mostly developer focused?
Right now, it's primarily developer focused. I think that Jackie on the CI/CD side has been thinking about some improvements here. So I'll have to get with Jackie Porter to kind of understand kind of what she's working on. But at this time, the analytics group is primarily thinking about kind of the developer experience and optimizing for that at the moment. But I'd be really interested in learning more about how this particular customer is thinking about things, so we can
Yeah,
consider
and
some improvements there.
it's one of the many use cases that they have. So it's not
Yeah.
the primary one, but certainly, if you know, I'll keep an ear out for more stuff and get that to you.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to participate in a call if we can hear more about it. But what are some of the kind of like primary use cases and things that they'd like to learn about?
They do the traditional development lifecycle. They have you know, federal programs. This is a health agency, so they have health related programs that come through, and they have to build applications towards it. They have applications like you know, trials, vaccine trial applications, applications like managing the biogenetic library of some sort, where, you know, they, in fact, for COVID, they had actually done they've actually got the entire genetic pattern of COVID actually in their library. So they do those kinds of things. So their development is kind of an interesting situation. If there's a new disease coming up and there are some sort of trials or vaccine trials like for COVID that's going on right now, they're building an application towards that, managing the entire trials program. On the other hand, they have some where they actually have developed processes and procedures on how to do these trials for other kinds of things. And those applications aren't changing on a day-to-day basis. It's just a, you know, 5-year, 10-year running trial period. You know, just imagine that as the outbound, but then they have shorter ones too. But they build the application, they use it, and they continue to use it for a number of years. And then at the end of it, they take all that data and do some analysis on it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sounds like a very cool customer you're working with.
It is. It's one of the most interesting customers. I don't want to name the name right now on the recorded call, but I can certainly share more details about it.
Cool. Sounds good.
I think the next question I had was, what does GitLab offer in terms of dashboards to display these metrics? I think you covered some of that already with what you were showing, the value stream metrics. Is there anything else that you'd like to cover?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about kind of our philosophy here. And I talked a little bit about how we're kind of concentrating on the development team and making sure that they're working efficiently. The way that we've kind of structured our analytics features in GitLab is that we have value stream analytics kind of at the very top level, which is, this is the 10,000 foot view of like how your organization is using GitLab at the group level. You can kind of drill in from there. The idea is to be able to identify specific areas of waste, and we'll have like very specific stage specific analytics features that allow you to kind of action for very specific personas and their needs. And like, I'll share like an example here. And one example is what we're building out for, what we've built out already for code review analytics, for instance. Like, we want to be able to have, you know, the 10,000 foot view at value stream analytics, but we also want to be able to understand, like, if I'm an engineering manager or a director, I want to be able to identify, you know, and drill into, working with the analytics group. I want to be able to see which merge requests are taking kind of a long time. So I can search for under the GitLab project and see exactly which merge requests are still open or lagging behind and I might need action on. I can jump over here to merge request analytics and I can be able to see over time the number of merge requests merged by month. We're actually working on this feature right now. So this is kind of in a partial state, but we're adding like a filter bar at the top and a data table below, so that as an engineering manager or director, I can go into value stream analytics, see the top level view of, we're taking, you know, 5 days on average to be able to merge something into master. Why is that? Click into that, be able to see individual merge requests, see the trends, and actually take action. For like the project manager, we actually have this issues analytics kind of feature where, you know, as a project manager or as a product manager, I can see like issues that have been opened per month and drill into like my specific group that I care about, and then be able to take action from here and click into and say like, oh, wow, it looks like we have 5 issues that were open today. If I can filter for bugs, for instance, and be able to see kind of which bugs are kind of like unaddressed and kind of which defects have gone kind of like untriaged and say like, oh, it looks like these 4, we've assigned these to milestones. It looks like these 4 here are open, but we actually haven't acted on them. We need to take some action. So, we have algorithm at the top level, and then we want to have these drill down specific analytics features that kind of help us be able to action specific to a persona for a particular like problem that they want to solve. So that's what we kind of offer in terms of dashboarding. We also have this feature that we call Insights, which I think is also probably one of our most flexible dashboarding features. And you can see that this is what we have that's publicly available for the GitLab org group. And you can see that we have issues, we have bugs created per month by severity. We have a number of different dashboards that you can click into here that are around like regressions and others. So these features and these visualizations here are all powered by this underlying YAML file that is highly configurable. You can see that it only covers like very specific projects within the GitLab kind of envelope of projects within that subgroup. And we have very specific like visualizations that are defined with this kind of, with this particular feature here down to, what specific labels that we want to look to, like how we want to title the charts, exactly what time period to look at, how we stack it up, and like what time period we're grouping the columns by. So the idea is that we want to have flexible dashboarding at the top level, along with the 10,000 foot view that you get out of the box in value stream analytics, and then have very specific ways of like drilling down into insights so you don't have to go and hunt and create visualizations yourself. I think that's the ultimate goal, which is that we want to be able to have a strong opinion in the product on like how DevSecOps kind of works out of the box, so that you immediately get value out of the product from our analytics without having to do a ton of customization or heavy lifting. But for those organizations that are very opinionated and they do have very specific ways that they want to organize their SDLC, we want to be able to offer features like insights, like customizable value stream analytics, so you're able to see what you kind of want to see and not have to be forced into GitLab's kind of opinions if they don't make sense for your team. So that's where we're going. That's what we have now, and that's kind of our philosophy moving forward. You'll notice that with things like code review analytics, we just have like the data table. And the idea is that we want to make sure that we're showing useful data to our customers before we start going further into alerting, visualizations, actions that you can take directly from that page, but that's the vision. Does that kind of make sense? Like, what are you kind of hearing from customers? What are they interested in, and where do you think that we should be investing?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Interestingly enough, not too many of my customers actually use the analytics features yet, because they haven't matured in their own organizations to realize what they should be measuring and why. So they just want something faster than what they had, whatever that was. So in some cases, they have a fragmented view of the world where they look at, oh, I want the best of breed of applications. So then you get the fragmentation of, well, then Jira is the best for issue management, and then GitLab is the best for code management and possibly CI, but maybe they have some Jenkins leftover areas or whatever. So they just don't have the data in GitLab to be able to make sense of it in that sense. Unfortunately, that's happening quite a bit at some of my customer sites. But the ones that actually start adopting GitLab, I think this is one of the things that I want to highlight to them to say, look, this is something you get right out of the box. Like you don't have to build a single report other than the insights piece where you do need to customize it if you wanted to make it more interesting. But it gives you that variability, right? It gives you the out of the box value stream analytics. And then if you want to get any more details, then you can certainly build what you need out of it. So what I'm seeing from customers is they're starting to get, at least in the public sector that I'm looking at, they're starting to get to a point where they're ready for those conversations. They haven't been having those conversations. It's all block and tackle so far. How do I get my pipeline to run faster? Security runs slower. how do I speed up my security? Well, I don't know. It's like, what else do you have going? It's like, no, everything else is perfect. I just want security to run faster. So that's a very limited mindset rather than the broad scope of, I want my entire application development to go faster. So it's a bit of a challenge there.
Yeah, I think the challenge for us on the analytics group is really understanding when we lean into our single application advantage and be very opinionated about, hey, here's what you need to be looking at. Here are the metrics that you want to work with, versus the organization that is very opinionated, knows what they want to find and knows what they want to see, and they want to lean into like tons of customizability and integrations with their existing tool chain. Like you said, like we have customers that are very opinionated. They said like Jira is the thing that we've made the decision to invest in. We have like incredibly high switching costs at this point, and that we're happy with Jira. One thing I'll say is that we've definitely built GitLab with a partnership with Atlassian in mind, and knowing that we want to be able to play nicely with Jira for those customers. And we do have things like, this is just a random slide from an old presentation I gave. We do have the ability to integrate directly with Jira at the project level, so that here you can see that you're looking in Jira and you're seeing like links and cross references into GitLab at the commit and merge request level. And also we have the ability to integrate or import Jira issues kind of in total, where we have like a really nice Jira importer where if you want to just pull over and migrate away from Jira, we give you the tools to do that. But ultimately, like you can mention Jira issues and be able to cross-reference things in GitLab, and then in Jira vice versa. So I think that Jira is probably one of our best integrations, and it's the one that we see our customers asking for pretty frequently.
So how do the metrics work in this case? Because a lot of what you showed is based on issues and MRs. So insofar as GitLab managing the MR piece, I get it, but what about the issue piece?
Yeah, the issue piece is still something that you would need to do most of your reporting in Jira if you're fully invested in Jira. And what we allow you to do is if you're using SCM in GitLab and issue management in Jira, your issue management and your analytics would still need to live in Jira, because we don't have those issues and those objects in GitLab to be able to reference and analyze. So that is a shortcoming, and that's definitely something that we could consider improving upon. But at the moment, the objects in GitLab need to be there for us to be able to do any analytics on them. So in that case, we would probably see the customer build their project management and their kind of like agile reporting in Jira, and they probably see like reporting and analytics around merge requests and how fast it takes you to get something merged into production using things like merge request analytics in GitLab. So you would have two sets of reporting in that world.
Yeah, but that's a conscious decision that they made by using different tools. So
sure. Yeah.
That's just something that they have to continue to support.
Yeah, I'd agree. I
cool.
Totally agree.
And then I think the last question is, how is a product, actually maybe not the last question, but one of the last questions, how is a project's maturity measured in GitLab? The product itself, not how the company views the maturity, but how the product views maturity.
Yeah, and that's a really great question, and something that I think that we really need to improve on. So we don't really have at the moment this concept of a project maturity in GitLab, where you create a project and we have like an onboarding experience where we provide you with some type of like maturity score or like report card on like what you could be doing better with the project level. I'd love to know if you think that's something we should do and what customers are asking for. The only kind of like analogous concept that we have is really around like this DevOps score, which is a feature that we haven't heavily invested in, where it gives you like a top level score, like how kind of like effectively you're using the instance kind of when comparing to other instances that are providing us with telemetry data. But there are a couple of like ideas that I'll throw by. I'd like to kind of share with you in terms of how we're thinking about kind of maturity. But first I'll ask you kind of like, what are you kind of hearing? Is this an area we should be thinking about?
What we're hearing, at least this one customer has expressed, is if I onboard a project or program on GitLab, I want to see over a period of time, let's say it starts out, let's take security as an example, because that was the most easy one that they could describe to me. Let's say when I first onboarded, there are 1,000 vulnerabilities that have been found. And over a period of time, say 60, 90 days, maybe a year, whatever time scale that is, I want to see how we're maturing on our security roadmap. Are we burning down stuff? Are we keeping it status quo, meaning there are things being added, but just as many things being removed? Or are we actually just not removing anything? That's one example. Again, security being the very, very key focus here. But from a overall DevOps maturity perspective, how much faster are we going, right? So when I first onboard the project and say I take the metrics 30 days in, which probably had 2 sprints, for example, you know, I delivered, say, 5 issues between those 2 sprints. But then as I go bigger time scale, how is my maturity being looked at from that perspective? So if I set a goal to go to 10, 15, 30 by a certain date, am I meeting those goals? So that's the type of maturity that. Now, feature maturity is something that I asked them about, but they didn't think that was something that they wanted to measure. Because that is something that we do, right? If we have a maturity page, we talk about how features are being developed. Although if you have any insights on that, I think that might be an interesting conversation for them as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, because the way that I've heard about the concept of project maturity is kind of 2 problems. One is, as a GitLab champion, I want to be able to tell my boss that we're using this great product and getting a lot of return on our investment. So I want to be able to show project, group, instance level, we're really using this product a lot. And the second is problem that I hear, which is, as a large enterprise, I want to be able to understand kind of the state of the world and provide a report card basically against certain projects or groups or teams that says, these are the things that are important to me as an org. How are we doing? Are we making progress against those goals? Are we not making progress against those goals? And the challenge with that is every organization is going to care about something slightly differently. Where you just talked about security scanning and vulnerability management is absolutely something that I hear about frequently. But I also hear about code quality. I hear about defects and incident management. I hear about engineering productivity and making sure that like we're at like a certain level and iterating and improving on kind of like the productivity of like our individual teams. So one challenge that we're trying to rationalize is like, where do we draw the line, and how do we create these kind of flexible metrics kind of out of the box? But the way that we're kind of approaching this in our next release is kind of in the following way, that we're considering introducing this feature that I'm calling like an enterprise DevOps report. And you can see that, you know, we want to be able to understand that different teams are adopting GitLab at different rates. And I want to find those centers of excellence and teams that are lagging behind or need to kind of use GitLab or change the way that they work. Or I want to find teams that are doing really well and then congratulate them on their great work and then use those learnings elsewhere. So the vision is being able to create different segments and pockets within a GitLab instance where I have like a team or a particular business unit that's defined by these people and these groups and these projects, and then be able on the right-hand side define goals for different types of metrics that you can start out of the box with some predefined metrics that GitLab thinks are important, like productivity, planning, defects, code quality, security, and so forth, and then eventually layer in customizability. And the idea is that I should be able to set goals for each of these and be able to see just kind of in like a green, yellow, red type report card. Are we actually making progress in this? Are we ahead of our goal? Are we lagging behind? Are we actually seeing like the number of new bugs and our defect kind of resolution rate like increase over time, and we need to take some action? And as an executive, I want to be able to see this screen, get like a very quick overview of how my organization is performing dependent on those goals, and take action if kind of needed. So that's really the vision of where we'd like to go. And we're going to kind of ship an MVC of this in 13.4. But this definitely is kind of an area that we need to invest a little bit further in, but that's how we're thinking about it right now. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And actually, thank you for sharing that Epic information, because I had somehow missed that. I think that will be of very much value to the customer that I'm talking to.
Yeah, and again, I'd love to speak with them to talk a little bit more about what specific metrics that they'd like to kind of see us focus in on that MVC to make sure that they're getting some use out of it, like within a month.
Yeah, absolutely. The prospect, yeah, we have weekly cadence calls. So maybe one of the weeks I may have you come in as an invited speaker and just talk about that with them.
Yeah, I'd love to join. It sounds
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then I think we touched on the last question I had, which is what custom reports, dashboards are available to present the collected metrics, and the insights covers that. So I think we're good on that.
Yeah, I definitely see customers make use of insights. You know, what customers will also do is they'll just take our structured log files and they'll ship them off to Kibana or Elasticsearch, and they'll create their own visualizations there in Grafana or some third-party tool. So you see a spectrum of people that really depends on kind of their use case and how detailed they want to create kind of dashboarding. If there are like custom reports and dashboards in Jira that this prospect is already using, I'd love to be able to kind of take a closer look at that to see if we can better support them in our product. So, but yeah, that's kind of what we want to. It's just a spectrum of needs. You know, some customers are very opinionated, love the stuff that we have out of the box. Customers that have very specific needs kind of want to see us like with lots of customization and are very particular about what they want to see. So we need to be able to support both.
Sure. And last question that I'm throwing in as a bonus, I apologize. The metrics that are collected are available to extract out of GitLab using API, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent.
That's
cool.
Correct. It depends on, so that is correct for the most part. There are, you know, for users on GitLab.com, for instance, there are, for instance, like instance and application level, like logging and events that aren't going to be available via API. So that is true for user-driven activity in the vast majority of cases. But there definitely are like structured events in the log files that wouldn't be available for like our SaaS users, for instance. But I'd imagine that for this particular customer segment, that's probably not something that they're probably more interested in self-managed.
Yeah, they are interested in self-managed. They usually have a log management tool like a Splunk or something that they're going to take logs anyway. This is more, you're right, the user-driven activities around what kind of dashboards we're offering.
Yep, perfect. Cool.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much, Jeremy. I appreciate it. I hope and wish you and your family well. And thank you for taking the time and joining us today.
You too, Samir. Thanks a lot for the conversation. Do you want to flip off recording real quick and we can wrap up?
I'll do that.
Thank you, sir.